schools dead? Find out now when we interview Dr. Theodore Rebard, professor at the University of St. Thomas in Houston, and we talk about what is the state of Catholic schools in America today, and what is the state of the university system today. Should you send your kids to a Catholic university or to university at all? Find out in this interview.
Number one, I want to start with, should every kid go to school? I think there's a pressure in society that every kid's got to go to school or they're not worth anything. What would you say as a professor at a university?
The answer is emphatically no. Before ever thinking about college as such, parents have to think about whether college at all. I wrote a piece, maybe it was about a year ago. You might be familiar, some of the audience might be familiar with an online publication called Those Catholic Men. And I think Jason Craig of Sword and Spade magazine is the force behind it. And the question that he asked me to take up there was alternatives, or why not go to college. And you might be able to look up that article on Those Catholic Men or via Sword and Spade and Jason Craig, where I develop a number of reasons why not to go to college.
But isn't it true that unless you get the degree, you're not worth anything in life, you never make any money, and you never amount to much?
No, this is altogether false, and there's so much evidence. The evidence is more than ample that a college degree is, number one, in no way a measure of success of any kind. Not even financial or professional or in terms of status. And it's certainly not a guarantee of knowledge or understanding or of personal excellence. It's none of those things.
Dr. Ted Rebard is our guest. He's a professor of philosophy at UST. I want to keep it in the philosophical realm this first segment. In the next segment, I want to get a little bit more practical. But what should parents do to help discern whether or not their kid ought to go to college at all?
Well, I suppose one thing is intellectual capacity. Not everyone, and this is simply a matter of fact, not all people are intellectually equal. I believe it was the famous American sociologist Charles Murray, who about 15 years ago made this, and he refers to this as an astonishing truth, in a book that he wrote. And his point, and he certainly had tongue firmly in cheek, his point was people are not intellectually equal, and that's manifest, but there is a great effort to deny that. So the first issue is capacity. And how is that evaluated? Well, partly through high school performance, partly through extracurricular interests. There are a variety of ways. I couldn't list them out. Secondly, there is a question of desire. Not everyone who is capable of a university degree, say in liberal arts, is necessarily therefore someone who ought to move in that direction. Every single one of us knows that we do have talents to which we do not have a drive, and we have to let those sit aside in our lives. This is part of the matter of discerning vocation. So those two things are certainly very, very important.
What about, as a parent, I always thought, our job is to help our kids discern God's one thing for their life. God has one thing designed for every human being on planet Earth, and it's up to us to try to discern and pray and ask God, what is that one thing? And maybe it's the call to marriage. And if they're called to marriage, okay, as a husband, as a father, how do I provide for that family? And then what do I need to do to figure out what school, what skill sets, what tools do I need to make that provision work to pay those bills to provide for that family? I would imagine there are a lot of people on planet Earth whom God has designed never to go to college. Not because they're not intellectually capable, but because that's not his will for them. What would you say to that?
Well, the statistic about this, every once in a while I ask this in class, because when you're in a university, the atmosphere is, everybody is like us.
Yeah. That's right.
And so the question I will ask students is, how many people in the whole world, by percentage, do you think are in your situation of pursuing and probably completing a four-year college degree? And I get a variety of answers, sometimes down around 20%. Well, the answer is absolutely no more than 3%.
Wow.
It's very low, and 3% is a high number. So manifestly, college is not an essential ingredient for a human life of any kind, much less for a human life of great excellence.
What about those students who...
By the way, it is a lesson from the history of philosophy ever since the time of Socrates that intellectual excellence belongs to the few.
Wow. On the Cardinal Newman Society's website for recommended colleges for Catholic families, which I find very interesting. Number one, I thought this list was longer, or at least it used to be longer. Now it seems rather short, actually. The first college listed, I wonder if you could guess this. Ave Maria University in Florida. Then let me just go through these real quick because it's pretty short. Belmont Abbey College is on here. Benedictine College out in Kansas. The Catholic University of America in D.C. Christendom College. Hey, now, I like Christendom. Franciscan University in Steubenville. A lot of people are familiar with that one. The John Paul the Great University out in California. Magdalen College of Liberal Arts in New Hampshire. Thomas Aquinas College, also in California. Thomas More College, also in New Hampshire. University of Dallas, that's a pretty well-known one. University of Mary in North Dakota. University of St. Thomas in Houston. Walsh University in Ohio. And Wyoming Catholic College in Wyoming, which is, I think, the one I would probably go to if I were 18 again. But it's good to have you back on the program, Dr. Rebard. One real quick question before we get a little bit more practical in the rest of this segment. And I wanted to address one more type of scenario that I think we see a lot, and that is sending kids off into the world to find their way. There's a lot of kids that go to college not knowing what they're called to in life, not knowing what they really need to do in order to provide for their actual vocation. They're just there to have a good time, to sort of be that perpetual student that never gets to anything, kind of never grows up. Have you seen that before?
I see it a great deal. I see it in the vast majority of all cases of undergraduates. A colleague of mine and I have had a laughing but sad debate over the past several years whether that number is 85% or whether it is 90%.
Wow. Scorched earth.
Yes. It's true. That's not just my experience. That is a very, very broad experience.
Wow.
By the way, I wanted to make one quick comment. You mentioned Wyoming Catholic favorably. I think the world of everything that they do at Wyoming Catholic. And if I were 18 again, if we could turn the clock back 50 years, I would go to Wyoming Catholic.
I mean, riding horses through the mountains while also studying Thomas Aquinas. Yes or yes?
Yes or yes. Anyway, go ahead, Joe, please.
Well, I mean, I just think this is part of parents helping their kids to discern. Step one, what is God's call for the child's life? And step two, what do they need to obtain that? And I just think many Catholic families that I've met and talked to over the past plus 20 years, they just buy this line that their kids have to go to school no matter what. And then, they sort of, when it comes to discernment, they go, okay, my kid isn't called to priesthood or religious life. Whew, all right, now they can go do whatever they want versus whatever God wants of them. I think that's part of the discernment breakdown. And then I see a lot of families pressure their kids to go to their alumni school, so the big box schools, because that paper means more when it comes to job time. So I want to get more practical at this for the rest of our segment here. How would you help parents better discern if their kid must go to college? What should they think of? What should they consider? What are the factors?
Every good curriculum, even if it is to be focused in terms of pre-professional studies, pre-law, pre-med, computer science, things of these sorts, the business disciplines, every curriculum must contain a very, very large proportion of liberal arts studies in history, literature, language, theology, philosophy, At least those. Art history should be included, and something further in fine arts as well. A large proportion.
But
these, and I want to take just a moment here because you've given me the opportunity to say why.
Okay.
Many people would say, why should they study literature? Why should they study philosophy? Why should they study theology? Leon Kass, one of the great professors of the entire 20th century, graduate of the University of Chicago, the University of Chicago Medical School. He did his biochemistry PhD at Harvard. He taught at St. John's College in Annapolis, and he and his wife both went back to the University of Chicago to teach there as well towards the end of their career and towards the end of Amy's life. But I want to quote Leon Kass. It's helpful, incidentally, to know that Leon Kass was the son of immigrants with no money in Chicago. He says the following. Today, quote, Leon Kass, today we are super competent when it comes to efficiency, utility, speed, and getting ahead in the world. But we are at a loss concerning what it is all for.
Well, to that point, then, one of the follow-up question I was going to ask is, when you say they have to have a strong liberal arts, I would agree, but I cringe as a parent because most universities have gutted their liberal arts departments and they've modernized them into some crazy utopian wokeness that I would fear for my child's soul.
Those things are not to be studied in public universities, and they are not to be studied in most even Catholic universities.
Now,
we ran into this problem a number of years ago, I'm going to say 20 years ago, at the University of St. Thomas, and the English faculty managed to turn themselves around.
Oh, wow.
And we have people like Dr. Janet Lowry and Clint Brand and Jim Barloon, Charles Crone, who do phenomenal jobs at the real thing. But yes, you're entirely correct.
And shouldn't parents figure that out before they send their kids off to these schools?
Yes.
What is the what's the liberal arts department like there?
Yes.
Because that's a good litmus test for the overall university.
Yes, it is, because it reveals the culture that is at work in that school.
So, would you say then parents shouldn't send their kids to woke schools at all?
No. Well, I make one exception, and I think it's pertinent to something that you've said already, or at least that you have hinted at. If a student is going to do pre-professional studies, as I say, pre-law, pre-med, business disciplines, things like this, it can be perfectly okay to go even to a big box school, as you say, but that child needs to be acutely aware, I am in enemy territory.
Yeah.
And not be seduced and not be moved by what is common, what is popular, what is acceptable.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
That's a real challenge for courage in a young person.
And preparation for the parents with their kids.
Absolutely. As someone who just graduated from university system, I think that is incredibly important because I know a lot of students who are like, well, you think you know better than the professor? My professor said I meet with people who went to UT, who went to other major universities. We're talking and they're like, my philosophy professor said X, Y, and Z. You think you know better than my professor who has a PhD in philosophy? I'm like, if he's saying nonsense, then yes, I do. And this is the point I think this should be made. A lot of parents think that, oh, I'll just send my kids to a Catholic university, then they will receive a good education. But is that true, Dr. Rebard? And can we trust the Newman guide to show us which schools are the good ones?
To take those two questions in order, the first answer is no. One of my best friends, whom I've known, we were 14 when we met, freshman year of high school. We happened to be in the same sections. And he just, or rather his youngest daughter, just graduated from Villanova. And this fella is quite sure, and his wife is quite sure, well, we sent all 4 of our kids, we sent to Catholic schools. And it breaks my heart to say, Mary, Bob, you did not. You did not. And that is true in the vast majority of cases. It is my strong suspicion that the Newman Guide is not reliable.
Really?
We have, and Adrian here has firsthand knowledge of this myself, but in, for instance, the case of the University of St. Thomas, there were individuals from the university, faculty, staff members, parents, and family, so on, who reported to the Newman Guide, which is run by a fellow by the name of Pat Riley, that there are certain things that are happening here that are inappropriate for a school which you recommend. And what happened was someone from the Newman Guide called the president of the university to verify this. Well, that's just not a canny move.
Right.
The guy in charge is going to say, oh, no, pay no attention to those things.
Nothing to see here. Move along.
Nothing to see here. But the Newman Guide is not to be relied on, shall we say, biblically.
Well, I mean, it's there's a certain sense of certain parents, I being one of them, that you want to protect your kid. You want to create a safe environment, a bubble, as some would call it. And so some of these schools, you might say, kind of fit that description, St. Thomas Aquinas College in California. But I would also say that there are many cases where I have personally met, we have about a minute and a half left here, parents that send their kids off and their kids are clearly not emotionally, spiritually, and have no maturity to stand their ground in the midst of an aggressive culture. So I think it really comes down to helping kids better understand what is God's call for their life, and then where are they at now based on where they got to go, and then find the appropriate. A JUCO college down the road may be the best choice for some of these kids, wouldn't you say?
Yes. By the way,
we have about 30 seconds.
That gives me an opportunity to say a word about what education is supposed to be, which would provide an index or a measure for parents looking at schools. An education is supposed to be not just intellectual stuff. That's key. It's first. It's number one on the list. But it is to be the formation of mind, of will, of imagination, of memory, and of the passions.
We're going to have to leave it there. Dr. Rebard, thank you for your time
Like that
today.
interview, be sure to like and subscribe, and make sure to comment down below any questions, comments, or concerns that you may have for us, for Dr. Rebard, and we'll be sure to pass them along and get those questions answered. And make sure to share this video with someone that you think will find this edifying.